Right guys, here is my final prediction video of 2025. Just a reminder, any prediction that I make is solely based on what has come up in the past. It's mainly going to focus on the 16 markers with perhaps a little bit of 8 markers as well. Again, as I said in the past 2 videos, these are only my opinions and AQA can do anything that they want, so please make sure that you carry on revising everything. The topics in paper 3 are quite big, and so there's lots of potential options here. Apologies in advance if it doesn't feel like I'm narrowing it down much. I will explain what I'm choosing and why I'm choosing it as I go through the video. I would also just like to say that I'm going to include all of the optional topics for paper 3, and so we're going to move through them quite quickly because there is quite a lot to cover. Also, please be aware that the majority of my experience is in relationships, schizophrenia, and forensic, and so they're the 3 that I'm most confident on. The other topics I can make a guess based on what's come up in the past, but I do have a lot less experience preparing for those topics. And just finally, if the video is useful, a like would be amazing. So before we look at the topics, there are a couple of useful bits of information that I just want to hand out. So paper 3 often has a lot of combination essays. There's also a bit of a trend of setting a combination essay in 1 year and then setting an individual topic from that combination a couple of years later. In addition, even though all the topics have content that have never been assessed, last year AQA chose to go back to some of the topics that have already come up. So I'm going to be taking all of that into account when I explain my predictions, and even though I might not necessarily put it up on the screen as an official prediction, I will still kind of talk about those topics as well. So let's get started with issues and debates. The 3 topics that stand out here are culture bias, idiographic and nomothetic approaches, and the nature-nurture debate. Now, culture bias and idiographic and nomothetic approaches have never come up as 16 markers, and so I would definitely start there. The nature-nurture debate hasn't featured since 2019, and with AQA reusing some of the old topics, they seem to be reusing content from around the 2019-2020 mark. So the nature-nurture debate is a nice little backup option as well. Gender bias and social sensitivity has only ever been tested as an 8 marker, so I would be tempted to cast an eye over those as well, but they have come up a little bit more recently than the other topics I mentioned, so I'd probably look over those after I've looked over the other ones. In the relationship topic, I think the factors affecting attraction and the theories of romantic relationships are still most likely just like last year. These topics often come up as a combination essay, so prepare for things like outline and evaluate 1 or more factors affecting attraction or 1 or more theories of romantic relationships. Be aware as well that in the spirit of AQA splitting topics up and reusing topics that have come up already, I might also be tempted to look at the absence of gating in virtual relationships. Yes, virtual relationships has come up relatively recently, but it is a nice topic that can be split up into 2 or 3 different theories, and the absence of gating is something that hasn't been tested very often. Moving on to gender, and based solely on what has come up in the past, atypical sex chromosome patterns has never been tested, and gender schema theory has only ever been part of an 8 marker. Atypical gender development hasn't made an appearance since 2017, so that's also a possibility. Based on the fact that 8 markers have been particularly popular of late, I would consider looking at how topics can be broken down. So, for example, discuss research into Turner's syndrome, or perhaps discuss social explanations for gender dysphoria. In Cognition and Development, I would be looking at the work of Piaget and Selman's levels of perspective taking. This is slightly harder though because there are no topics that have never been tested. Piaget has only ever come up as an 8-mark application question, but not as an essay, so that one stands out, whereas Selman has been an 8-mark essay in the past. Schizophrenia is slightly more clear-cut. The diagnosis and classification of schizophrenia has never been tested as an 8 or a 16 marker, so that would be an interesting topic. Remember, that's about reliability and validity of diagnosis, and that topic is due for a little bit of a revamp in the upcoming spec changes, so that might be one to have a look at. Biological treatments came up in 2017 and not since. Token economy systems has also never come up, so that might be worth a little bit of a look, especially as it came up as part of a combination essay last year in forensic psychology, so there might be a little bit of an overlap there. The interactionist approach is also worth looking over. It has been tested before, but not for a while, and this is a really nice one that can be broken down into an 8 marker. So you could get asked something like, outline and evaluate the interactionist approach to treating schizophrenia. In eating behaviour, there are a couple of topics that have never come up, which are the ones that I've marked as being contenders for the essay. However, I will just say that AQA have got a bit of a habit of taking 16 markers from one year and then reusing them in some way the following year, like I said earlier. So in 2023, there was an essay that practically gave you free reign over 4 topics. And at the time, I said it wouldn't surprise me if only one of those came up the following year, which is exactly what happened. So the predictions are based on what has and has not been tested, but as you can see, there have also been lots of combination essays which could get split up. So moving on, we have the beast that is the stress topic. I always forget how big this topic is. So there are a number of essays that have never come up in this topic, and annoyingly, last year AQA decided to retest something that had already been done, rather than focus on something that had never been tested. But hey-ho. Causes of stress like life changes and daily hassles would make for a really nice little combination essay, as would ways of treating stress. So I would be brushing up on those. Keep in mind what I said earlier about 16 markers being turned into 8 markers, so workplace stress as a 16 marker could then be turned into an 8 marker on daily hassles or life changes, for example. The physiology of stress has also never been tested, but I think that one is likely to be more of an 8 marker than a 16 marker, because you could be asked to outline and evaluate the general adaptation syndrome, for example. Also, I'm not going to put this down as a prediction, because otherwise I'm just going to end up predicting everything. But in 2019, there was a combination essay on individual differences, so maybe look over that, as AQA may decide to pull that apart and just test one of those. For example, discuss the role of personality type in stress, or something like that. Now, coming to the final section, aggression has got 3 topics that has never been tested: ethological explanations, media influences, and desensitization, disinhibition, and cognitive priming. There are, of course, some that haven't been tested for a while, including evolutionary explanations for aggression, which hasn't been tested since 2017, and institutional aggression that has only ever been tested as an 8 marker. There is quite a lot that could be tested in that topic, so that could make for a nice 16 marker this year. In forensic, there are 3 topics that have never been tested, and 1 that's only ever come up as an 8 marker. Profiling, I think, is a good shout, especially because it could be a nice combination essay, something like discuss the use of offender profiling, or something vague like that, which would allow you to talk about both or just one type of profiling. There could also be a comparison essay between the two, or again, it could be completely separated, and you might get something like discuss the use of investigative psychology, or discuss the use of geographical profiling. Okay, so there's lots of options and lots of things that could happen with the profiling topic. The atavistic form is due to be removed from the spec entirely, and so that could be assessed this year before it's removed. And differential association theory is the 8 marker that I mentioned earlier. It came up in 2019, and so it could be due a resurgence this year. Okay, and then finally we have addiction. There are 4 topics that stick out here: learning theory and gambling, cognitive theory of gambling, the theory of planned behaviour as it's due to be removed from the spec, and Prochaska's model. Now, 2 of those have never been tested, so I would start there. The other 2 haven't featured for a little while, so you can have a look at those afterwards. Please keep in mind what I've been saying throughout the video, that topics often feature multiple times, especially those that have come up as part of a combination essay, and also 16 markers can be turned into 8 markers and vice versa. Okay, it goes without saying what I said at the beginning of the video as well. These are only my best guesses. I don't work for AQA. I've got no insight into what could come up. And so this is just an educated guess based on what has happened in the past. Please continue to revise everything to give you the best possible chances of succeeding in the exam. I hope that's all made sense, and I hope that's been useful. You can find links to various videos in the description below that will take you to the topics that I have been talking about in this video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comment section below, and I will do my best to get back to you ASAP. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck for paper 3 and for all your exams.